Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are the CEO of Code42, which is a leader in data loss and insider threat protection, particularly like employees with data leakage or employee theft, which is really interesting. First time I was on your website a lot this morning and doing a lot of research for you for this interview. And I was like, man, where were you when Edward Snowden was still in secrets from the NSA? If only they'd had Code42. Who's the other guy, the Assange guy? If only they'd had Code42, none of this would have happened.
Well, also, there's a guy named Anthony Levandowski who stole data from Google, all their self-driving car data, and took it with him and formed a company. Then he sold it to Uber. He ended up getting convicted and going to jail. And it was pretty embarrassing for Google that he took all this data, 15,000 files, on his last day of work. And so, you need software like this to protect you from employees that do make some poor decisions on their way out the door.
Yeah, that one's even more relevant. That one's crazy, actually. The fact that happened, and man, he got pretty far too, getting it all the way to building it and selling it.
To build it, sold the company, and they had to be disgorged, and it ended up ruining his life. He went to prison. He's a convicted felon. There's an end to that story, by the way, that most people don't realize that in his last week in office, President Trump did pardon Anthony Levandowski and commuted his sentence and let him out of prison. So strange ending. You might ask why, but he's a friend of Peter Thiel's, I guess. And, if you're a friend of Peter Thiel's, that gets you into the White House somehow.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea. Well, sure. Yeah. Why not? Everybody should be pardoned. Why not? What do I care? Hey,
anyway, thank you so much. Let me just say up front, thanks for having me on your podcast. We're going to talk today about things that I'm near and dear to my heart, which is, certainly Code42, but also just leadership in general. And you nailed the intro where, to help people understand what we do, we focus entirely on insider threat. We like to say our mission is we secure the collaboration culture. Now, that's a lot of words, I know, but we don't want to just get in the way of people moving data around. Today, lots of us collaborate and share data. And so we just wrap a layer of security around that to actually enable that sharing. And so it's a really more modern approach to how to handle this problem. It's not an authoritarian approach to handle this problem. And it really helps our customers, who are the security teams, be an enabler of the business as opposed to simply getting in the way.
How did you get to be CEO of Code42?
That's a good question. I'm a serial CEO, and the venture capital firm Accel Partners called me about this job, and I went and looked at it. And at the time, the Code42 was really a backup business, an endpoint backup business. Sort of think about taking everything off your endpoint, your computer, and putting it in the cloud. So we did this for consumers, small businesses, and large enterprises. And I looked at it and I said, geez, that's really an interesting company because there's great people, there's some great tech, and also great customers, but it's in a dying business. And can I go there and transform that business and find a new area that's a growth area for the business? And that's what I've spent the last 9 years doing. I will tell you, if you'd asked me 9 years ago, will it take you 9 years? Unfortunately, I would have said, it'll probably take us 3 to 4 years. And so transformation of a business is a lot harder and a lot more humbling than I expected. So I've been here 9 years. I love the people. We have great investors. We have great customers. But we've been through a lot of transformation over the years.
Joe, what do you make of this idea? Because I experience this all the time, that everything takes longer than you think. You just mentioned hey, we'll have this wrapped up in 3 to 4 years. And why do we set those expectations for ourselves? And it's probably realistic at the time, but I've never had anything that's meaningful, I should say, that doesn't take much longer than I originally expected.
Well, in my case, I can't speak for everybody else, but in my case, I think I have to admit, if I'm self-reflective, to a little bit of hubris. I really thought I could come in there and make it happen, and that it would be pretty easy because I'm a smart person and I'll figure it out and da 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 da. So I've been, like I said, it's humbling, but it's also been, it's exciting. And what happens? When I started, I never thought there'd be a pandemic, right? That was a game changer. I never And I didn't appreciate some of the changes that would happen around me. I think part of what we all assume is a static environment. It's going to be the same, and we just have to fix stuff in 2 or 3 years. But the environment isn't static. It's constantly changing and evolving itself. And so as you pursue your mission, you got to do a lot of things on the sides and in the front. And so it's always hard, like you said. I think it's more that we think statically as opposed to, hey, everything's going to change as we're in the middle of this transformation.
Yeah, who could have predicted COVID and all of that? That was a crazy, few years. By the way, are you based in Washington? I see your background. Are you based in Washington, D.C.?
I live and grew up in Washington D.C. and I'm not part of the government and have never worked for the government.
That's a great disclosure.
I've had a security clearance in my role as a software security person, but I always like to tell, because people always, oh, you must work for the government. It's like, no, I don't. Our company is actually based in Minneapolis, and then we have offices in DC, and we have an office in Colorado. I commute fairly frequently up to Minneapolis, where most of our employees are.
Why Minneapolis? How did that end up being the headquarters?
Well, the original founders, as I mentioned, I was recruited by the venture capitalists when the founding CEO had left about a year earlier, and they were looking for a new CEO. And the original founding team was living in Minneapolis, and it's a good place to build a software company. And I really appreciate the people in Minneapolis. We have really strong tech and engineering folks up there, and for a lot less, not a lot less money, but like a more rational spend than, say, if you were in San Francisco.
Probably a better quality of life for the employees too, right?
Great quality of life for the employees, land of 10,000 lakes, a lot of recreation, people that work hard, but they also have good lives too. So that's something that's important to me.
What does a typical day look like for you?
That's a really interesting question, because I don't think there is a typical day for me. One of the nice things about being the CEO is that you can have, someone who is sort of a right hand, like a chief of staff, executive assistant. And I have had that same person for about 17 years. Her name is Julie. And Julie and I tackle every day with, what are the things that need to be tackled this week, this month, in the next quarter, or today? And it's really a luxury, to be honest, to have somebody help you think through that. Because when you're in the throes of a product marketing plan and you're into it up to your eyeballs with your marketing team and listening to all the different ideas and plans, sometimes you might forget that there's somebody or something that needs to be dealt with over here. And so she does a great job of making sure that I stay focused. In terms of basic habits, though, I mean, I get up every day and walk my dog. That's something that's going to happen every day that I'm in town. I'm going to work out every day. I learned a few years ago, and a bunch of CEOs are like this too, people those of us that travel a lot, is like, going to the gym was never really an option, because it's always like, the gym's different in every hotel, and some hotels don't have them, or they have a bad one, and then it messes up your routine. And so I said to myself, well, there's always a floor. And so I do all of the last 25 years of my entire exercise routine pretty much is push-ups and planks and sit-ups and exercises that I can do in a hotel room, or out of town, or in any place. So there's really no excuse. So, someday when I retire and the gym is right around the corner, then I'll end up going to the gym. But it's always too much of it. I found for me, it was too much of an excuse when I'm on the road to be like, well, I can't work out because we don't have my right gym equipment.
Yeah. Do they have the right equipment? What do they use? All that type of stuff. Do they have a Peloton?
Now I'm a big Peloton rider. So I've gotten into that. And I've learned to find Pelotons in the cities that I go to. And we have two at Code42 as an example. And of course I have one at home, but again, back to my regular day, there's not much that's regular. I tend to, meet with my teams a lot. I'm a big communicator. I think the surest sign that you're walking into an unhealthy company is when you ask, tell me about the executive team meeting. When does it happen? And everyone will say, oh, it happens every week on Monday. It's like, well, when was the last one you guys had? Oh, it was like 3 weeks ago. We skipped it last week because we didn't have this or whatever. And so I'm religious about, we're going to meet every week. I usually do it on Tuesday because everyone hates Monday if you put the executive team meeting on Monday. So my preference is Tuesday afternoon, but we at Code42 do it in Tuesday morning right now, and just getting that cadence that's regular. And then you take that weekly cadence of that team meeting and you turn that into, okay, every 6 weeks, I want to make sure I'm doing an all hands in front of the company. And then every quarter, we're going to do our quarterly business reviews, but we're also going to do our larger update for the company. And then every 6 months at Code42, we do a bring everybody from every place together and do either global kickoff at the beginning of the year or mid-year kickoff in the middle of the year. But I think that cadence for a CEO is really important, to tell people what you should expect and sort of falling into those habits. And as long as you don't let it get out of hand, so that you're only just doing meetings all the time, I think it's super helpful. And I do the same with my directs. We meet weekly. Some of them I meet every other week because they're maybe more experienced and they don't need the activity. But I try to keep a regular cadence.
Another thing, we were talking earlier about who could have predicted COVID and the pandemic 9 years ago. Another thing that you probably could have predicted, but maybe wasn't at the forefront of your mind 9 years ago, was AI and artificial intelligence. And in particular, in your industry, that must be a major, major challenge, both useful and a threat.
Yeah, I mean, no question. Listen, and I want to be clear on this. I'm not an industry pundit. I'm not an expert in AI. But when every industry pundit is saying this is the biggest thing since sliced bread, you pay attention. And we are incorporating AI in our software. And we are watching how our adversaries are using AI. And in our case, our adversaries, and that's a strong word. We try not to use that word when we talk about insider threat, because they're our employees, they're our friends, they're our colleagues. But we're also watching how they use AI. So a couple of things we've done at Code42. First, we built a model using machine learning that essentially helps us identify if a document is personal document or if it's a corporate document. It's just one more data point we look. So if you're moving that to an untrusted location, let's say you're moving something to Dropbox from your company machine, we're not just going to block that movement. We're going to let that movement happen. And then we're going to do a whole bunch of analysis on that. And we're going to say, well, here's what we know about this person. Here's what we know about their previous activity. Do they use Dropbox regularly or not use Dropbox regularly? And then also we're going to use this AI model we built to say, does it look like corporate data or does it look like personal data? Because, we'll look at the source of where it came from. Maybe it came out of ADP. And if it came out of ADP and they're just a regular employee and our model says it looks like a W-2, then we're not going to do anything. Nobody's interrupted. Nobody's time is wasted. But if they're an HR employee and it comes out of the ADP system and it looks like a corporate document, maybe a list of salaries or whatever, we're going to investigate that and make sure that our clients, that gets bubbled up to the top for our clients. So we're using AI. The other thing we're doing is that because our end users, our customers' end users, the employees, are using the AI models a lot in risky ways, we've built specific capability to look, is somebody moving data to one of the AI engines like OpenAI or the Microsoft engines or whatever. And we flag that with a separate category that most of our clients would rate very highly as, hey, this is a critical event. Somebody moved data into an AI model. So we're kind of watching it from all different perspectives. I think in security, where AI is really, and I want to be clear on this, in security, we've been using AI for years. And in fact, I had the CIO of Booz Allen, as the CISO of Chief Information Security Officer of Booz Allen, say to me at the beginning of a call, Joe, if you mention the term AI or machine learning at the beginning of this call, I'm hanging up. Now, that was 3 years ago when he said that, because people were so sick of hearing from security companies how we use AI, et cetera. That was 3 years ago. Today, if you're in a sales call with any kind of security team and you don't mention AI or machine learning, then you're out of the process. So it's funny how these things go, because we have been using these capabilities and these tools for a long time in security.
That's incredible. Hey, what are you reading? What reading recommendations would you have? So I guess that's like a two-part question. What are you reading right now, and what are some books you would recommend to our community?
So right now, I am reading a book called Eruption. I hate to admit that, from Michael Crichton. It's Michael Crichton's
Well,
latest
yeah, don't
book.
hate to admit that. Sweet.
Well, it's a little bit of a it's not as good as I was hoping it would be, but I'm one of those stubborn people who like basically once I start a book, I don't give up on it. And so I'm not saying I'm recommending it to you guys. I think let me pull back on the recommendations too, because I have books that I feel so passionately about that I want to share, and I'll tell you what the best books I've read recently are Demon Copperfield and The Covenant of Water. Those are the best novels I've read, fiction. Fantastic. If you haven't read Covenant of Water, you should read that. If you haven't read Demon Copperfield, it's also really impactful book and just a great read. It will get you every day to being like, when can I open my book? But on the business side, like I'm so passionate about a couple of books. One is Good to Great. It's literally the best business book I've ever read, bar none. Everybody that's a CEO should read this book. And if you ever get the chance to meet or listen to or work with Jim Collins, you should absolutely do it. I've been fortunate enough to meet him a couple times. And then also I tried to get him to come work with me at Code42, but like he's solving the really big problems for big companies, and his team was great, and they were actually gave us some advice and they were helpful, but I couldn't convince him to come over for a full engagement. The other one that's really helpful if you're trying to make change is a book called Switch, and Switch is a book. Um, it's about how to make change happen when change is hard, and it's written by the Heath brothers, Heath. And I love that book so much, and it was so impactful to how I was doing things at Code42 and at Eloquent, my last company, that I actually had um, one of the authors join my advisory board, and it was a pretty fun experience for him too. So again, I believe in it. And then listen, every CEO should have the basics of sales strategy. And for me, I learned Sandler in my early 30s, Sandler Selling Effect. And there's a book, the book on that one is called You Can't Teach a Kid How to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. And which is a funny title, but it's also teaches you the basics of Sandler selling. But if you do the challenger sale or whatever, every CEO needs to know that stuff, because at its core, being a CEO is sales. You're selling constantly all kinds of different constituencies. And then the one that's very recent that was written by the guys that wrote the Challenger Sale is one called The Jolt Effect, Jolt. And that one is a good one too. It's a good read right now. So most business books are not worth the paper that they're printed on. But I would tell you that those four business books, Good to Great, Switch, and the Sandler book, and then the Jolt Effect are all worth reading.
I think you're absolutely right about Good to Great. That it's kind of unbeatable. That's a book that will last forever.
I mean, I got to teach. I was teaching a class at American University in their business school, and it was not the entrepreneur of the first class, but it was okay. Now that you have a business going, it was called growing small businesses. Basically, how do you take it from after you started it to the next step? And it was the first class I'd ever taught at the college level, and they were like, I was like, "What's the book? What's the syllabus?" And they go, "Why are you looking at us for that? You're the professor. You picked the book, you picked the syllabus." And I was like, "Really? I pick it?" I mean, obviously that's obvious now, but like I'd never done a class like this before. I was like, "Okay, so I'm picking Good to Great," and they were like, "Great." I was like, "Wow, okay." So Good to Great was the book that I taught from for that class. So that's how strongly I feel about it.
That's incredible. In your opinion, what are the three most important traits for a leader to have?
Um, I don't think there's any one way of doing leadership, first of all. So I think, I can share with you what's been successful for me. Um, But there's so many different types of successful leaders out there. But what's worked for me is to be sort of three things. It's like being authentic, um, being transparent, hyper transparent, and then being relentless in the pursuit of better. So I talk about that last one a lot with my team. So let me sort of break each of those down for you from where I'm coming from. So when I talk about being authentic as a leader, it means you have to live yourself the values that you espouse for your team. So that means demonstrating consistently that even when it's hard, you stay true to the company culture and the values that you've set for the company. And so an example of that is one of our parts of our culture is team first. We put the team first. We put the team goals first. Okay, so you can say that, but like, how are you actually being authentic on that? Well, we judge every employee is their bonus is based on how the company does, and our company goals. We'll have 3 or 4 goals every 6 months, and we're like, based on hitting these goals, everyone gets their bonus, and that means I get paid the same way as a software engineer gets paid or a marketing person gets paid. And there's a lot of times when the board will come and say, "Well, Joe, we have this plan for you. You'll have a different plan." And for me, I'm like, no, the what I'm getting my team to do, I want to be part of it too, and we're going to lose and win together. And so the same rules apply to them as apply to me, And so, a very tactical example of that at our company is that I also learned as a CEO, again, sidebar kind of conversation here, that every time I was having HR, like major HR issues with an employee, like literally 99% of the time, when there's a big incident, there's alcohol involved in that. And so I started something in my last company. I said, you know what? We're going to have 2 drink tickets at our company events. And then if you want to have more drinks than that, then that's on you and whatever. But we literally hand out tickets to people as they come in the door. And, people that are big drinkers don't respond well to that. They get upset. "Oh, this is crazy. I can't believe you're limiting me." But what happens is people come out of the woodwork. They're like, "Yeah, I don't drink. Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic. Yeah, my mom was an alcoholic." And they're so grateful that there's a mocktail and that it's not a culture of around, we don't call it happy hour anymore. We call it social hour, And so it's little things like that. So sorry for the segue, but the long story is like, sometimes I'll walk into one of our events and they'll hand me 2 drink tickets, and then somebody thinking that they're doing the right thing will come over and they'll be like, "Hey, Joe, you're the CEO. Here's 2 more drink tickets." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's not. I'm going to live on the same and have the same environment and the same expectations, and be held to the same standards as all you guys." And that includes for the 2 drink tickets, but it also includes like the expense policy. And I'm staying in the same hotels you guys are staying in, and I'm doing the same things you guys are doing. And so I think that's again, if you're going to be authentic, that's really important. As far as transparency goes, that's my second one. And that's a personal value. I don't expect everyone to live the same way I do on that, but I tell everybody everything, because I've learned that if the employees know why they're trying to do things and why we're trying to get there, even if it's stuff they don't want to hear, even if it's bad news. When I first hire employees that come work for me, a lot of times they're like, "Ooh, we don't want to say that. Like, we don't want to tell people that will demoralize them." I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't demoralize them. They need to know the same problems we're grappling with, right? They need to understand we're dealing with this problem so we can harness them to solve this problem. And it's more demoralizing when the employees know there's a problem and the executives pretend like it's not existing. And we've all worked in companies like that. And so I like to share everything with my team. And the funniest example I could think of that was my first day on the job at Code42. I did what I always do. I have a big all hands, and I said, here's my name, here's what I've done, here's why I'm here, here's what I'm excited about, here's what I'm worried about, and then I'll take any questions. And there are no questions that are off the table, And then I got a couple of questions where like, how many kids do you have, and whatever. And I told them all that story. And then the third question was, how much cash do we have in the bank? And I was like, 6.5 million, something like, I think 6.5. It's 6.5, right? I look over the CFO, and he's just like this, and there's like this audible like murmur in the crowd. And I kind of look around like this. I go, is that not what you expected? And the person who asked the question goes, no one was ever willing to tell us that. I go, yeah, we have plenty of cash. Cash is not our issue. I'll probably raise a bunch more cash. We're gonna go to this. Like, I'll tell you what our issue is, and it's this. And it was like, it didn't cost me anything to do that, but what that earned me was trust, right? Like, why wouldn't I trust our employees with where we are? Because, by the way, if we're going to run out of cash, I feel like they should know. Like, I feel like they should know. But also, if we have tons of cash, we have plenty of cash. That was not an issue. Like, they should know that too. Like, there's no hiding it. So, I'm just a big believer in being transparent. And then I think the last one is if you're not going to be successful as a CEO, like, I like to phrase it as the relentless pursuit of better, because people that talk about the pursuit of perfection, there's no perfection, and life changes and everything changes. But like, if you're constantly making everything better, it's exciting. It's really exciting. And we have a whole set of values at Code42, and one of them is do it right. And part of doing it right is being a positive source of energy for the team. So we actually talk to our employees about, like, hey, you're not going to be a positive source every day of your life. We get that. Some days you're going to have to suck energy from others on the team. But like, overall, you should be a positive source of energy for the team. And that positivity enables the relentless pursuit of better, because it means you can constantly question what's happening without people thinking that you're just being a negative person. You can have blameless postmortems, where hey, this thing went sideways. Let's dive into why it went sideways, and everybody gets into it and gets excited about, like, how do we solve that problem? We lost a customer can be devastating, or it can be like, wow, let's figure out why we lost them so we don't lose 10 more, and really dig into it. And I think one thing that differentiates, I got acquired once by a company that I'll leave their name out of it for now, but the CEO, the president, told me, she said, Joe, we only care about the engineers. We care about the engineers and the salespeople. We don't really care about anybody else. And I was like, wow. And because it's so against everything I believe. Every part of the business matters. And so when I talk about the relentless pursuit of better, I'm talking about HR, facilities, legal, sales, marketing, and improvement is contagious. So if you see the HR team, 3 people, 4 people, they're trying to build a better system for HR. They're trying to serve their customers better, who are all the employees. Like, and you look around and you see the facilities team who's not satisfied with the building we have or how it works or the lunch they're bringing in, but they're like actively trying to make things better. Like, that kind of vibe can be contagious across the organization. And I think it goes with one of the maxims that I use a lot, which is see the truth for what it is, but not worse than it is. So the ability to engage and see that, like, we can do better than this, and not have to worry about, like, we don't want to say that this thing is not perfect because it'll be upsetting or we'll insult somebody or whatever. I think that's super important. And I'll close that relentless part with the last thing, which is, I think, the first lesson I can remember from my mom. And my mom said, can't never did anything. Can't never did anything. And I remember her saying to me that as a kid all the time, because, I can't do this, I can't do that. And we'd always get that back. And so that, good for you, Mom. It stuck with me. And it's one of those things that I bring with me to the CEO table, which is like, I like big challenges. I like taking things on. I love the relentless pursuit of better. And I think people that work in companies that I lead, they like that too. And if they don't like it, they tend to say, you know what, this is not my vibe. And they flush out, and we shake hands and they go. And that's okay. You can't have every culture is not going to be the same, and that's perfect, because we're all different. And so you should find the culture that you like working in. It makes me sad when people say, I don't like my job. I'm like, well, go somewhere else, because there's a job out there that you will like. You just got to find it.
You mentioned something earlier that I think is really interesting, and we don't talk about enough as a business community, and that is like kind of the effects of alcohol and kind of the downsides of that, like incorporating that into the work environment. That is a really interesting thing that you've done there to kind of limit the effects that that might have. I think you're absolutely right that most HR issues usually are stemmed from that.
It's look, I whenever I tell other CEOs this, they just go, "Oh, yeah, I can't. There's no way I can get that past my team." And also, look, in the high stress jobs that we have, a lot of us drink, but like my dad was an alcoholic, and there's a lot of that I'm like, I don't, I'm careful about that, but I've been stuck. And there's a lot of religions, by the way, that don't drink, right? And so like you are limiting your ability to be a place that's welcoming to everyone if you overemphasize that. So I'm one of those people that I believe like, hey, I want to be here. If you want to have a couple of drinks with at social hour, I'm good with that too, But I want it to be welcoming for everybody, and so you have to be intentional if you're going to do that. Like when we first started, I told the HR team like, hey, I want to have a mocktail, and they were like, oh yeah, whatever. And then it didn't happen. And the next time I literally came, I was tough with them. I was like, look, you guys have failed because you didn't do that. And we started doing that, and the results have been fascinating. We've had some happy hours where the mocktails are outsell, they're free. They're out picked up, versus the non-drinks. And so it's just a good reminder that like the world doesn't revolve, around that. And the company needs to be cognizant of that. And they really need to be cognizant of that. So anyway, it works for us. And I think, again, there are people, well, you'll laugh at this. When I first took over Code42, there was a keg in the company, in the developers area. They had a keg, and they'd be like, well, the developers like to have a beer at 3 p.m. And I was like, what? No, we're not doing that. So I was very unpopular with a number of people at the beginning of my tenure when I took the keg away. But you know what? I think, again, it's the unseen people that weren't complaining that now it's a more welcoming environment. They're not worried about being sexually harassed, because somebody, people, they say stupid things when they drink too much. So I don't know, little things, building your culture is all about lots and lots of little things. And, one of the things that we are now at Code is we're an on-camera culture. And so, people chuckle at that, but it's like, look, we're so remote all the time that if I don't I don't know, 70, 80% of communication is me looking at you and looking at, are you smiling? Are you angry? Are you whatever? And so like, and if you're going to be on the call, you're on camera. If you've got to be off camera, then get off the call. Now that doesn't mean like, hey, I got to go off camera for a second and do this. Great. I come back in, I turn on. We're not crazy about this stuff, but we also are like, if you're going to be on the call, don't lurk in the background. Be present. And little things like that are things that set your culture. And as I interact with other companies, now it's funny to see not everybody operates. Everybody's got their own way of doing things,
What are some apps or products or tools that you use on a daily or consistent basis that you couldn't live without?
Slack. I mean, like Slack I mean, everybody's the same on that. There's nothing that's, super interesting there. Look, my phone, my watch, I'm a communicator by trade. So texting and Slack are by far the most important. We use Salesforce. We couldn't live without that. We love our product. We're in our product. One of the great things that COVID did for me was that it allowed me to get much more into the detail of our product and learn how to demonstrate it or do a demo myself. And so I was finding during COVID, like I could call CISOs or email CISOs and be like, hey, will you take a 10-minute meeting? And they're like, sure, I'm sitting at home doing nothing, And so I started demoing the product to all these CISOs. And so it's gotten me a lot more engaged with our own product. So I couldn't live without our own product. I love our product. It's so good, it's so easy to use, and so empowering for other organizations. And it's so in line with our culture of securing the collaboration culture is our mission, and we take it very seriously. We really think about the people that want to collaborate and share, and let's not get in their way because there's a few malcontents who are going to do the wrong thing. So the example I used earlier with you on Dropbox is a good one. You know, when we first go in, companies say, "Oh my God, we see all these people moving things to Dropbox. We didn't know that was happening. Your products really showed us that's happening." I'm like, "Yeah," and then they'll say, "So we're gonna cut off network access to Dropbox," and I go, "Okay, but let me just talk to you about that for a second. Do you have any people here you think that go to church? Because a lot of church groups use Dropbox, for sharing information and moving things. Do you have any soccer kids that play soccer? Because, a lot of those teams, they share all that data on Dropbox. Now, do you want your employees not to be able to access that when they're at work from their work computer? Because, that could inconvenience them quite a bit." And so it's an example of like, you don't need to do that. By having our product, we can watch it, we can score it. If it becomes a real problem, we can notify you of that, but we can allow the employees to actually just be productive and access some of their personal, repositories without over-indexing towards let's turn this into Fort Knox and not let people be productive humans. So I'm a big user of that. I'm trying to think what other tech that you got anything that you use that maybe I didn't bring up, Clint, that
No, no, that's great. Like, I don't have any like specific app or anything, but obviously, we all live in Gmail and Slack, all of these various things, or Microsoft, depending on, you got to do one of those two things. Finally, let me finish here. We ask everybody the same question to end the interview, and that is at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
So I have I love this question. It's a great question. There are two people that need to be mentioned, and the first one is a gentleman named Bruce Payne, same last name as me, zero relation. Bruce was a professor of public policy at Duke University when I was a junior, and I was a work study kid, so paying my way through college. I had a job at P&G coming up in the summer, and I was 2 days away from leaving. And Bruce said to me, "Listen, Joe, what are you doing this summer?" And I told him, he said, "You're not doing that. What you're going to do is you're going to go and set up a leadership internship program in Washington, D.C. for next summer." And I was like, "I don't even know what are you talking about? I'm 20 years old. I'm not qualified to do anything like that." He says, "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to figure out who the best run nonprofits are in the DC area. And think about it this way, Joe. If they're great nonprofits, they must have great leaders because they don't have resources, they don't have funding, they're fighting intransigent problems. These are the biggest issues. And if they're being successful, they must have a great leader. I want to put an intern with that leader next summer. Go. Oh, and by the way, I can make it a work study job for you, so you'll get paid to do this." And I was like, "Okay." But I went back to DC. Bruce gave me no direction other than that, what I just told you. He didn't look over my shoulder. I had to figure out who are the best performing not-for-profits. So I had to go figure that out. And then I had to go knock on doors and be like, "Hey, can I meet with you?" And they're like, "Why do you want to meet with us? Do you have money?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, and then I'd pitch them on like, "Hey, you're the best leader. We want to bring an intern up. We put most of our interns in the public policy department on Capitol Hill, but those aren't the best leaders." And that was Bruce's point, like on leadership. He was teaching about leadership. And so I went and sent, and that program still runs to this day. And that taught me a lot about leadership in general, in terms of giving people rope, giving people room, and really challenging people without getting in their business, and also making a long-term impact. So thank you, Bruce, for that. And I wouldn't be where I was today without him. And then the last one I want to give just props to is a guy named Brad Willison. So I had been fired by a mercurial CEO. He hired me as president to be his number two person. And less than a month into the job, he decided he didn't want a number two person. And he fired me less than a month into the job. And everyone including my wife, assumed I must done something really bad, like I must have done something wrong or, committed some crime or done something. And so nobody would touch me with a 10-foot pole. And Brad, who was a venture capitalist, would meet me for lunch, and we were talking through jobs, and he offered me a job, and that job turned out to be as the CEO of Eloqua, which was a software company that is sort of globally known today. But we built over $800 million of value over the next 6 years together, and it was a 14x for our investors, and all our employees did great. And it was one of the best places that I've ever worked, and people will tell you it was one of the best places they've ever worked. And so, sometimes you need to take a chance on somebody, even if it looks like they've got a little dirt stain on them. And I'm grateful for Brad for doing that for me. And, I am always looking to pay what both of those two did for me, pay that back to the next generation that's coming along.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, it's been a real honor. It's been a pleasure.
Listen, you and I could talk for the next 4 hours if we want to go through culture and leadership and values, and we've just barely scratched the surface. So I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate the platform, and I love what you guys are doing.
Of course, come back on. We'll make it a series.
I'd love to do it.